about the future for senior living all over the United States. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Okay.
Questions, comments?
Will always be rentals?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Really? Okay.
Has this concept been introduced anywhere else in the country?
It has. Ironically, it started actually a few years ago. The latest community, if you Google, you can Google senior small homes or senior cottages, they're called, but they've already, communities like this are being built on the West Coast in Washington, in Oregon, and now are being built in Texas. And I think that, I mean, my gut tells me that this really is the future for senior living. And these types of communities of small homes that have smart home capabilities built in are really the future. So this concept's probably going to really take off.
What is the average rent for a studio? And then you said there are 2 bedrooms?
So there's studio units, 1-bedroom units, and 2-bedroom units. So right now we calculate average rent for the studio unit. The base rent would be $1,800. The 1-bedroom is $2,000 per month, and the 2-bedroom is $2,200 per month. And that's just the rent. If you want services such as housekeeping, you know, there'll be activities, and we're going to provide a driving concierge. There will be services that are extra, but it'll be on a menu basis, so people can choose what they want. And again, the goal is to provide services that help people and even coordinate services, because some of the services we won't offer, but help coordinate services so people can remain independent. So really whatever they need, that's the goal.
I'm just gonna ask here. So I see Thomas Devine has raised his hand twice. I've tried chatting with you, Thomas. I'm just not sure what your role is. If you are just a public member, this is not a public comment forum. However, if you have a specific question that you would like to ask, you could chat. You could type that to me, and I'll see if I can pass that along.
Greg, I know you said you tried to go before the pandemic, you tried to go kind of door to door. What was the feedback you're getting from this? Obviously, we had a lot of vocal feedback from the last plan. Many of us on the planning commission are all for this type of a development because I think it fits well into the neighborhood. I'm just curious what feedback you heard from the neighborhood.
Yes, thank you. So generally, and Alderman Kastner could probably speak to this, the feedback that I've been getting has been very positive. Going from 4 levels to a ranch style, more residential, less commercial, walkable. Unfortunately, because of the amount of water that is coming into our property, it really does not make basements very viable. And so the feedback that we've been getting, and Alderman Kastner can maybe speak to this as well as Christy, I have about 35 or so letters of support. I have had some people that are not supportive, but it's only a couple at this point. Generally, I think that most of the neighbors, not all, but most of the neighbors would prefer not to see through streets, especially 119th Street, which was designed to be connected with Carpenter Homes to Edgerton. As most of you know, the Village of Hales Corners did not want us to have access to Edgerton Avenue, and we had to go through a legal proceeding in order to get our private access. However, the street access, which is 118th Street, is still there. This, proposal, most neighbors seem to favor not having through connected streets. And so this is.
I would have to concur. I've received a number of emails stating that their desire to keep the streets that are there not connected permanently is probably one of the biggest things, along with the idea that the interconnecting paths that would then connect to the Whitnall Woods or preserve, whatever it's called, stay and be there and forever. I think that was pretty much the gist. I think the lowering of the buildings did help, and believe it or not, I think I did get a number of people that had feedback that they did like the first plan as well. Um, but I think the main thing is not connecting the streets from the feedback that I have received, which I had forwarded to Christy. I think
Yeah.
the number is like 40 or 50 people that are probably in support of it, along with a letter from the entire Winter Park subdivision, I think it's called. And they all signed it and we're in support of. In addition, some of the individuals had forwarded on some information as well. I think the buildings have to look nice. I think the structures really need to be something that's sustainable, that will last through time. And I think the preservation of the park, it could be a park, it could just be a pathway with a permanent easeway, but that is critical to the neighborhood as well as, I think, promoting the city's best use. And I think the idea that you could, eventually walk plowed past, to um, to the schools is a plus too.
One other
Thank-
thing I would point out real quick is that think of this as a small neighborhood, senior neighborhood within a neighborhood. The goal is to really to create a community within a community. This would essentially be a community of seniors supporting and helping each other remain independent, almost as if it's a little residential neighborhood within a neighborhood. And that's really the future.
Greg, may I ask, so you had mentioned that you sent a letter out to neighbors to the west. Is that accurate or?
Yeah, actually, I've probably sent out at least 3 or 4 different letters. I know,
Recently?
I'm sorry.
Most recently about this development, did you hit up Holmes Avenue and Carpenter or?
And
generally, where
119th
did you
Street.
cover?
Yep, and 119th Street and Barnard.
Okay.
Will these have washers and dryers?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very beneficial to have one floor, especially with seniors. I live in a condo, and I know some people have had to install those Acorn, stair systems and stuff like that. And our washers and dryers are in the basement, which as you get older, it's a little more difficult.
Yes.
This is Mike. I actually preferred the first plan much better than this one. This one just seems to consume the entire site. Internally, there would be things like most of the seniors have, dogs, right? They like to walk. I'm not sure what kind of interconnectivity there is with these units. It looks like they're, narrow streets in between, kind of, or driveways. I'm not sure if they're like patio areas, those kinds of things. And I understand that this isn't the point where we're looking at architectural review and sort of the livability of the site. The other concern I sort of have is at the end of Holmes Avenue, the close proximity to the single family neighborhood over there in the upper corner. In the original plan, there was a lot of, I don't know, natural landscaping, I guess, kind of protecting the neighborhood from the development to the east. This one doesn't do that necessarily. But then again, I haven't seen the landscaping plan either, where that kind of vegetation might be inserted. So that's my take.
And Mayor Nitsky, thank you. One thing I would point out, and I bet you there's a plan commission member that's experienced this, but what's happening in senior communities right now is they've been locked out and families have been prevented from visiting their loved ones for the last 7 weeks. And unfortunately, in a bigger box building like we proposed, residents are not able to leave, families aren't able to visit. This is really presenting a huge problem across the board. And I read publications every day, and I don't know what the answer is, but this is really a serious problem. I have my own personal experience with my 99-year-old grandfather who just moved into independent living in January 6th to be exact. And I can tell you that he's angry right now and is not happy that he can't leave his apartment and he can't have any visitors. So this is going to
Okay.
be really critical.
Okay, Mr. Petrowski, thanks for this nice presentation. I agree with the mayor. I did like I just love the architecture and the style of the first presentation better. But I really do get your point. I have a mother-in-law that's living in a unit right now, like a big condo unit, and we cannot go in to see her. And so I get what you're saying there. And I mean, honestly, until you just said that, I really was pretty disappointed in this. I see this, and I see your side of that. I like the population increase of the larger building. I like bringing more people into Greenfield. And so the larger unit had a lot more, people coming in because it was like twice, 3 times the size of people living in our city than this is, right?
Correct.
So this is so much smaller. And so is that, obviously you've looked into this, this is going to be sustainable for you guys. It's really surprising that you can make it with this. I'm very impressed. Is the large H-shaped building, that's just 1 story?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
And you make a very good point. This is going to be really a stretch to make this all work. This concept plan is 1/2 the density. Our traffic study showed prior to this in our old plan, which was double the density, that we would have only a 3.5% impact increase in traffic. And this plan is 1/2 the density, and then 1/2 of that half, which is the studio building, will be for residents who they can't drive. They have to be for residents who have given up driving. So we're talking 1/4 of the amount of units that'll be drivable. As you know, or may have heard, the school district was very concerned about traffic and driving, and this essentially basically provides a plan that's 25% of 3% increase, because only 25% of the total will be driving.
Okay.
I don't think there's enough green space. It seems like it's all buildings and there's not much of a buffer for the neighbors. I don't like the layout of it.
Yeah, just from my perspective, it was more, I understand the change in senior housing.
Mike, can you just, because I've had some attendees ask me,
Oh, sorry.
just if everyone could just maybe just, state who they are, because maybe not everyone can
I'm sorry.
know the voices. Sorry.
Christine Helene. I was the one that just made the previous comment about the green space.
Yeah, this is Mike, the mayor, I guess. I just don't like the layout. I mean, I understand the theory of senior housing and the need to be separate and to have separate access and the visitability of it all. I get that. And I think that is likely the trend for the future as we get away from a lot of larger buildings that do many of the same kinds of things. I just don't like the rows of, and I don't, this will sound derogatory and it's not meant to, but if you were to pretend those were all trailers, this would kind of look like a trailer park, laid out row by row by row. And
Right.
that's not meant to be, it's meant to be constructively critical, curves and walkability and all of those kinds of things. I understand that there is site sensitivity and trying to utilize it the best that you can to get the most in it. um, the theory of small homes and the kind of services that you would provide, and the architecture is all very good. It's just like the kind of row structure that it is, I guess, is the what I was trying to get at before.
You are correct that it is very rigid. Those dashed lines are the walking lanes, which are part of the one-way traffic that would be provided on the private access. And unfortunately, it's one of those catch-22s. If we're not going to go vertical up, then unfortunately we have to spread out. If we're going to provide a more of a ranch design, unfortunately we have to spread out more. Yes, we have to be cognizant of our neighbors to the west. Um, we are the neighbors to the south, and there are neighbors to the north that we want to make sure we provide and keep as much buffer as possible. But unfortunately, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We either have to be ranch more low level residential design or go vertical. And this plan is really about going, ranch level. So
So the next question I think a lot of people are going to ask is if it's no longer the strategy to preserve as much of the site like the first plan, then why not just make this a single family subdivision? Since it essentially covers the area that a single family subdivision would, especially in that area south of homes.
very good point. I guess the key differentiator would be then we were talking public roads and connecting to Edgerton, connecting to 119th Street, connecting to Carpenter. In addition, all the preserved woods and wetlands north of homes, we would continue, which we have already started and have been mitigating those wetlands. So essentially we would have to mitigate all of them or whatever we're allowed to do. So that process was started last December, and we're continuing on that process regardless of what happens to continue to try to mitigate as much or everything as possible. So in a single family layout, we would continue to make the effort to mitigate all of these artificial wetlands. So we are saving quite a bit of wetlands and tree cover north of homes.
This is Brian Weiss. Personally, I like the concept of the senior living. I think it's the perfect fit for this piece of land. I too do like the first proposal better, even though it had some higher density. I thought it preserved and made more of a neighborhood feeling. The concept of having, the townhouse or the side-by-side ranches, I like that. I don't know if there's a way to incorporate, I'll say the best of both plans, maybe a little more density with the larger building and put some rolling roads or curving roads with some of the side-by-sides to get a mix of both. And I'd be very open to that concept. Again, I think this is the right use for this piece of land. And the fact that it will have a low impact just because of many of the residents that do drive, they're not going to be driving all that frequently.
Amen to Brian. This is Steve Rogers, by the way.
I guess the feedback we're hearing is it needs more work, doesn't it?
Crystal, I agree, it needs more work.
Okay, do we have any other, there's no voting with a conceptual plan. Do we have any other comments or questions?
I don't, Carl, this is Steve Rogers. Carl, did you give an opinion about this?
I think my opinion is right in line with pretty much everyone here, and I did like the first proposal better. It was taller. It was preserving more land. I do think the neighborhood is definitely concerned about interconnecting of the streets, which I agree. Even the connections that are not connections Um, I think they're too big and they're too straight into it. They don't deter the traffic to go into the neighborhood. So obviously these are minor things, but yeah, that what it looks like on paper is it's like a 20-foot road. It definitely doesn't need to be that. It could be two, 5-foot pads is essentially what they're accomplishing there. And the fact that they have the turning radiuses on the entrances just doesn't need to be there. It could be, more of a, okay, you're going to walk through this, and if we have to take emergency vehicle through, we can get there. And then I, I'm torn on what that row of houses is going to look like. 4 of them in a row, straight line. Is that going to be the end of everything? I don't know. Architecturally, I don't know if they're what Greg proposed with all those different buildings. Does that mean they're going to have that many different design buildings so they don't all look the same? There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah.
If they're all different, then it can be broken up that way, and there's trees out in front, and there's I could almost envision somebody parking a golf cart in the garages to get to the clubhouse, in that kind of a community.
Yeah. Did
I don't
you,
know.
Which is very common, Carl.
did you have the same feel from the constituents in the area there that they were all against that the majority was against the first design?
No. The people that were at the Common Council meeting, the majority were against that
Yeah,
first
right. I
design.
remember
Is
that.
that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
But I did get quite a bit of feedback saying, geez, I did like the first design and I just didn't come to the meeting kind of deal.
Okay.
This is Bob Krenz calling. I like the first one. I like the concept of this one, but I think the first one was architecturally more favorable to me. So I don't
I
know.
would agree. That's
Yeah, I'm with Bob.
What about exploring single-family homes in that area? This is Crystal Lee.
The feedback and the connection of the street seems to be not in the high wish list of what the neighbors want. And the city streets is another obligation for the city, I suppose.
sure.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the financial feasibility of a single family neighborhood here, quite frankly,
Right.
for the developer. I'm not sure there's the return on the investment.
I don't know the answer to this. It seems like the developer, if he does go single family, he would keep every home and then rent them out. I think that's within someone's right, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there would be zero zoning regulation of ownership versus tenants. That's not something the city can regulate.
I think the state disallowed us controlling that a long time ago.
Mhm.
Excuse me, one point. I know some neighbors were not excited about single family rental. However, after doing soil testing and having our soil engineer drill holes, the water table on the property is much higher than what we thought. These were drilled in December of 2019. We are going to we're going to drill more holes actually soon. But if we end up having to build slab on grade single family homes, that is not very desirable. And that is why, after researching, which I researched after the last meeting in December, single family rentals is the fastest growing segment of the rental market. And given this COVID virus, where people are living in close proximity to others, the idea of a single family rental is very appealing. It's the fastest growing real estate segment right now. You can Google it and look it up, and there it's all over the internet.
One thing I just wanted to mention is when a formal application is submitted by Mr. Petrowski, this this concept, this layout would also require a comprehensive land use map amendment and a rezoning to a planned unit development. So in that respect, absolutely nothing changes from the last application. The same zoning request would be needed and the same comprehensive land use map amendment would be needed in order to move forward with this, because there's more than one principal building on this parcel. So I just wanted to reiterate that if this concept is formally applied for, a public hearing would be required. The same properties that were notified for the previous proposal would be notified for this new proposal.
This is Mike again, the mayor. With regard to the 6 buildings that are west of this property as well, that would be part of the PUD. And I would think that some architecture and some design is going to be required for that as well. I'm not at all comfortable just with, 6 tan squares, to be developed later. Same holds true with the H building. The standards would be much higher for each of the buildings as part of the PUD process with regard to architecture and design, right? Is that a fair statement?
Correct. And we haven't submitted anything because again, this is just concept review at this point.
Okay. Well, I
Great.
might have a totally different feel about this. This is Steve Rogers again. I might have a totally different feel about this if the H building, maybe you've got some design up your sleeve that is going to make it look as sharp as the first presentation did. And then if you can make all these buildings look as nice as that, well, then that would be something different. But that's just not, wow. That's just such a letdown from what we saw the first time around. So
Remember, the feedback though was that the feedback from the Common Council meeting was that the first plan was too institutional.
wow.
This is residential. And I built that building in Brookfield. That building is in Brookfield, Wisconsin. In 2013.
Okay. No insult intended. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. But it sounds like Alderman Kastner, it sounds like the two of you had, well, I guess you're talking about the Common Council altogether. So maybe you had Carl on your side and the rest of them against you. I don't know, but
It was a 3-2 vote.
a 3-2 vote. So that was, I don't get the institutional thing. It was so nice looking. Anyway, I'm out.
Yeah, just from my perspective too, I noticed that there was a comment in the chat that I just opened. I think this is Mike, the mayor again, from Karen, who liked the bigger building. The bigger building, from my perspective, when we looked at it initially, was that it preserved a lot of the area around it. It also did the things like not have the traffic go into the neighborhood to the northwest. It also fit in really well with the school district. And it was really a nice and expensive building. I understand that, the economics have changed dramatically over the last 3 or 4 months. But I would hope that whatever goes in here is done extremely well to high standards. And I'm not suggesting, and part of me is like with Steve, we have that building, that studio residence elevation, probably 4 or 5, 6 places in Greenfield that I could probably rattle off if I was given 5 or 10 minutes. It's just got to be, we wanted something better, right, to make such a drastic change to the comprehensive land use plan and with regard to zoning, right? That's where I'm coming from, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, I would agree with you because I thought that the first plan kind of gave it its own neighborhood feel, and that was kind of like the center focal point, if you will. The architecture, you draw everyone in, and I just like the way it fit in the neighborhood, preserved the green space, preserved the trails. This one seems to eat a bit more of that up, and again, I think there's more work needed on it. I think if you blend the two a little bit more density in the main building and ease up in the green space in some of the other buildings, maybe we find a happy medium.
Okay, Christy, just to confirm, but if we end up doing single family, then there are no meetings
That is correct. Yeah, you would formally submit a subdivision plat, to the lot sizes would need to meet the minimum of this single family zoned parcel. But correct, zero, notification to neighbors, zero public input because it is already zoned single family.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Carl again, Kastner. I think the feedback that I'm hearing from the commission is the architectural design of the buildings that you're laying out, and maybe even the placement of them is what's critical here. Commissioner Rogers is right. The buildings that you built in 2007 is a little dated. And I think that needs to be probably improved a little bit.
Well, again, we haven't even worked on the architecture. Those were just conceptual.
I agree.
This is Bob Krenz. If you decided on going single family home, you could not build basements. Would that be correct?
We maybe could, but it will be very difficult. And essentially right now, based on the water table and what we're given, it would be very difficult. And everybody would have water problems, which is apparently why this Holiday Heights was redone, with storm sewer, which now drains into our property.
There's another thing, there's a sleeping something in the room with the property to the west. One of the concerns that I have, and that's a completely different property. I mean, that has water issues, but it's also surrounded on 3 sides by single family residential neighborhood, in 3 different communities, New Berlin, Hales Corners, and Greenfield. The concern I have with, creating this kind of density, even though this is sort of the buffer from the institutional uses to the east and the residential neighborhoods to the west, is that if we sort of allowed this kind of density here, then that same kind of density would be difficult to argue against potentially to the west. And I think Alderperson Kastner agrees, and I think we've all agreed when we saw some conceptual plans of the development to the west, and I understand we have to do these one by one, case by case. But that plan essentially impervious surfaced almost the entire area, right up to the edges of the property, the residential properties, at least in Hales Corners and Greenfield. I'm not sure that's great land use planning. I understand that this one's different and distinct because it is more of a buffer. But again, as we move westward, with the available land that's out there, including the land that's not under Greg's control where these 6 buildings are, I think we have to be pretty cognizant of potential doors that are opened up to the west. I'm not aware of anyone, while we can talk about whether the big building is good or whether these smaller buildings are better or more economically viable and whether this fits in well here. We can talk about that all day, but those same discussions will be had as we go further west. And I don't think anybody thinks that something like this would fit in surrounded on 3 sides by single family neighborhoods. And that was pretty clear at the last public hearing that we had, or one of the meetings that we had. I don't remember which one it was. So, I mean, even these 6 buildings, which I understand are under the basically custody and control of someone else, I'm not prepared to just say, yeah, you can put 6 buildings in without making absolute certain that they are very, very nice buildings, and that there is the appropriate green space, and there's a little bit of thought of how it integrates into the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? That's
Um,
where.
Yeah, and again, those are 6 side-by-side townhomes. So they're not multifamily buildings in a sense of what you're referring to the west. 6 ranch side-by-side townhomes.
But
So I
again,
think what Mike is saying, if we're gonna approve the plan unit development, then I guess that has to be planned out. It can't be this, X that you could put almost anything in. And then the design has to be done and there has to be some work if it's part of the first agreement, if you want, am I right, Mike?
I think you're absolutely right. It's not a situation where you can divide that into 6 lots and you're zoned to be able to put in a townhouse, whatever kind you want. Things like that have happened in the city before. I think down by like 43rd and Elvina, or somewhere in there. There are those kinds of structures going in, and they're not long term. They're not the best thing for the city. They don't add high value. The other thing I want to just point out about this is that the neighborhoods that surround this or are adjacent to it are some of the nicest, highest value neighborhoods that we have in the entire
Yes.
city.
Yes.
So I'm very cognizant of that. Whatever goes here has to be reflective of the kind of surrounding that it's around. We often talk about, well, if we could get, a Target or something that's worth this, or we could get a restaurant that's worth that. Collectively, the homes in this neighborhood are worth a lot of money. And then we want to make sure that the value of those homes at least stays the same and is enhanced as a neighborhood that you'd want to live in. And anything that happens with this concept plan has to reflect that. It has to make the neighborhood better. And I understand that there are issues with regard to the economics, and I understand there are issues and lots of philosophical discussions about what trends are in housing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to compromise, especially when the land use plan is being changed and the zoning is changed, and there are expectations in the neighborhood. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
This is Chris Helene. I totally agree that the density, there's too many buildings, there's not enough green space. It just doesn't look good.
Well, essentially, then what you're saying though is that our only option then is just to build single family, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have ranch design and not be spread out. It's just impossible. So our really then what you're saying is our best option is just to develop it as single family.
This is Brian Weiss. I know I'm not saying that at all, Greg. I think you could do a mix. You have a story ranch. Maybe that's a 2-story building that has your biggest density, not the 4-story that you previously had. And maybe you have less side by sides where it's a little more spread out and a little more, I'll call a rolling street. Think of a hybrid between the 2 plans is kind of what I'm suggesting. Now you'd have to look at the economics. Does that make sense for you? I think you can do a hybrid of the 2 plans, and that's what I would suggest, and that's what I'd be in favor of. It's certainly your call. If you want to come back with just single families, that's your land. You can develop how you wish. But I think this is a nice fit for a senior development, and I think you could do a hybrid of the 2 plans. I think this just eats up too much green space. I know some of the neighbors weren't in favor of a 4-story building. I get that. Maybe we could do something that's a little better looking in a 2-story, a little more dense in the main building, and then some options with these side-by-side ranches. I like the concept. I think it can work. I'm just one of the many here.
Yeah, and but I echo and agree totally with Brian there. This is Steve Rogers.
And this is Bob Krenz. I echo both those other guys.
Surprised that we all were in favor of the last plan, huh?
I don't remember the last that meeting that we were all in favor of the last plan, but I'm liking some of that now. I know that I was. I feel like I was vocal there about how great that looked, but maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't say what I should have said then either.
I was only an alternate back then. I had no vote. Bob Krenz here.
Yeah, this is Don Carlson. I was in favor of the last plan too, but the reason we're talking about this tonight is because it was turned down by the council, and that's why the alternate plan is here tonight. So I think we need to remember that too.
Don, this is Brian. I absolutely agree with you. I think that's why if we come to a hybrid, I think that might get past both the planning commission and the council, and quite frankly, meet the needs of the majority of the neighbors. I think there's a way to make that fit.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to go, I believe.
That, of course, just depends on the economic viability to the developer, which we don't know, but.
No, absolutely. That's where his
I'm pulling
call.
for you, Greg. I'm pulling for you, Greg. I want you guys to succeed, and we want you guys to be very successful and in Greenfield.
There's definitely needs that need to be met. And so all points taken. Again, this was very conceptual, and that's the feedback is good. And, now we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can make a hybrid of both plans that hopefully get passed, both the plan commission, the neighbors, and the council.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr.
Fantastic.
Petrowski.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to us, Mr. Petrowski.
Okay, we're moving along now to the next three items, 5A, B, and C, with regard to the special use permit for Plato's Closet to be located in basically the Greenfield Fashion Center, right? The site plan review and the signage plan appeal. Christy?
Okay, thank you. Let me get Shane on here so he can speak. And I figured out how to do this without having to close without having, allow to talk. There we go. Okay.
I hear a lot of clicking there.
Yeah, sorry. Shane, you're muted right up. Shane, let's just test this.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Plato's Closet is currently located on Layton Avenue in the Panera, where the Panera Bread is located, and is proposing to move to the Greenfield Place with a 4,000 square foot tenant space, which is highlighted here with the red arrow on the eastern portion of the multi-tenant commercial building. It's zoned planned unit development, which permits used merchandise stores as a special use. And given that there are other used merchandise stores, there have been in this complex and in neighboring properties, we have expedited the public hearing to next week. Hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 10 to 9, and Sundays, 11 to 6. And they're proposing approximately 10 to 14 employees. The site is in good condition. In fact, they're actually slowly replacing light fixtures within the parking lot, new LED downlit light fixtures. There's a little shortage of parking. And now again, that's what the code says. We all know, and this picture reiterates, there really is no shortage of parking at all. But the numbers are what are required and provided before you, and the Common Council can waive that as is written up in the resolution. They're also requesting a signage plan appeal. This tenant space allows for 40 square feet of wall signage. They're proposing to utilize the existing sign from their previous location, which is a 52 square foot channel letter, individual channel letter on Raceway sign. The sign is proportional to the tenant space. It doesn't visually overtake, and the landlord has granted permission for a colored channel letter signage. Staff recommends approval, and as mentioned before, this is scheduled for public hearing next week.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'd make a
Crystal.
motion to approve the conceptual plan, special use permit, and site plan review as presented, incorporating
I'll-
staff comments.
I'll second and then under discussion.
Second by Alderperson Kastner.
Okay, so I have the mayor and I have Kastner.
Yep.
Yeah, someone wanted question though. I thought.
No question. I was just going to second the motion.
Oh, okay.
Just from my perspective, accelerating the process is a good thing. Plato's Closet's been over by Panera on Layton Avenue. They've been a great operator and a great business within our community. It's well frequented. This shopping center needs tenants in order to get better. It requires rent that goes to landlords to improve the shopping center. We understand that. Retail is incredibly tough. I'm grateful that they're coming to this. They're not leaving the city and they're coming here. So the motion was made and seconded for all of those items. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving along to,
Shane, I'm just gonna say we're good because I can't see your face like we normally would in a meeting.
oh, I'm sorry, this is Mike again, I should say.
Oh, no. I just want Shane, is there anything that you wanted to add or?
Do I? No, thank you guys and look forward to the meeting next week and hopefully get open again.
Thank you,
you.
Shane.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
5 at a time.
Moving along to items 6A, B, and C. This is also a special use permit for MKE Doghouse, a pet boarding business to be located 4305 North 108th Street. This also includes the site landscaping and architectural plans and the signage plan appeal. Christy?
Okay, thank you. I have enabled Chaz Misko, who is the applicant, proposed owner of the site, and Jason Pine, the architect. Chaz and Jason, is there anyone else I should allow or enable to speak on here?
Does Anderson need to or no?
Yeah, I know there's some real estate representatives. I'm not sure if they need to chime in.
Okay.
If they need to, they can probably utilize the chat
Yeah.
feature to let
Yep.
us know.
Okay, thank you. So we have a new owner proposed for this site that's been vacant for quite a while, the previous Wisconsin Rental Center, to establish a dog daycare, boarding, grooming, training business, and the name would be MKE Doghouse. The property is zone C4, which permits pet boarding uses as a special use. The public hearing could be scheduled as soon as June 16th. Their hours of operation are generally open 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week, but there is overnight boarding. So in theory, a 24-hour operating facility. They're estimating 30 to 50 dogs a day for the daycare, but 10 to 20 overnight. I need to move my bar. And approximately 3 to 5 employees here. One thing I want to note is that this property, as mentioned, is zone C4. So is the residential property to the immediate west. And Mr. Misko has actually an offer to purchase that property too, in anticipation and to prevent any possible concerns from an owner at that property with dogs barking. And they do forecast maybe the possibility of expanding this use into that property someday, but for now it would remain a rental owned by the same person that would be operating the dog daycare facility. Just some pictures, some as-is pictures. There's landscape timbers throughout the site that will be removed. And we'll move forward with the proposed improvements. So we have a new site plan with increased landscaping areas compared to what is there today. So an increased green space, which is great to see. And then some just general basic parking lot improvements and the construction of a four-sided refuse enclosure. As far as the building improvements go, they're proposing to paint the existing brick building a darker gray and then have a EFIS architectural feature here above the entrance. This is the main east facade facing the parking lot. A portion of the brick they're proposing to paint green. Here is the north facade, again, a portion of the building to be painted green, but the majority a dark gray. And then the other facades, which are not as visible, the south and the west, painted gray. And then also item 6C is a signage plan appeal. They are proposing 2 wall signs, which is above what the code technically require or allows for. However, these wall signs are really architecturally integrated into the building and the new design. And the sign code allows for 118 square feet. They are keeping within that square footage, but just asking for 2 wall signs. They will be constructing, as you can see here in the top right corner, a new monument sign, replacing the existing pylon sign off of Highway 100. Staff recommends approval and recommends that this be scheduled for public hearing on June 16th.
Looks way better than what's there, standing there now.
Chaz and Jason, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add. Normally, now would be your time to go up to the podium if we were in the council chambers.
This is Jason Pine. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't really have much to add. We do believe that this is, drastic improvement to what's there now. And initially this is really meant to be kind of an upstart. We have limited budgets here to really do a whole lot of things, but I think that's what the future holds here with purchasing the lot to the west of us here and being able to potentially expand operations and potentially make more improvements to the site as well. So, but yeah, overall, I guess I would just open it up to any questions. Chaz, do you have anything to say?
No, I mean, again, just good evening, everybody. I just, thank you for, considering us as, being able to be here on this site. And again, we're just here to answer any questions you might have regarding what we're proposing.
Can you possibly sell me on the green canopy?
I love the green as a highlight, as an architectural element.
I was wondering if you were going to say something. I think it looks great.
It's actually it's part of the logo and the I guess the branding, if you will, and that's really where it came from. And I agree. I think it's kind of a modern architectural feature, color that you would see.
You guys
Are they two different? Are they two different greens?
It just
No,
looks because of the stucco versus the brick, but it's the same color.
Okay.
And actually, where that ephes is proposed now, there's actually storm damage. There used to be a mansard roof structure there that was torn off by wind, and currently it's just, I mean, it's cobbled together plywood, and the roof membrane from the flat portion behind it is kind of lapped over the face, and I think just adding this element all together is going to improve it quite a bit.
It started off as one very long, just simply green band. I asked them to add some scoring or something to add some, a little bit of variation to it.
It's a very old building, and I think you're doing a wonderful job with it. Just one quick question, going back to the monument sign and the location. Do you have a picture of what's the front elevation is right now? Going back, going back to what it looks like.
It's getting there.
Sorry.
Sorry. There you go.
Okay. And do you have a picture of what it looks like now before that?
Yeah, she should. It's in the packet.
I've got a picture of that in my packet.
Wait.
There you go. Okay, so
Which page are you guys talking about in the packet?
That one.
that's it
Oh,
right there.
okay, all right.
That's that picture.
Okay, just with regard to the height of the monument sign, that corner has a lot of structures in it with regard to the bridge and the ditch below it, right, or the drainage channel. I don't have an objection to that sign being a little higher so that you can see it. I think if we used our normal monument sign standard, which I think is what you've incorporated, you wouldn't, it would be blocked essentially as you're going south. I guess there's no way to pull up Google Drive maps and all that stuff, but having a taller sign there probably makes a little bit of sense, just so people can see it.
I agree, but I don't know what ground level is on the sign that they're proposing.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think it reaches the bottom of where the Anderson sign is. See that little green square there, right there?
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
probably about whatever height that is. And maybe the monument sign is that height, but I'd hate to have it lower, too much lower than that, because you would never be able to see it.
Agreed.
And the base of the actual readable signage is 4 feet off the ground, and then the sign itself, the sign face itself, is about 5 feet. So the top of the sign would be about 9, which might be up to. I mean, it's probably about the height of the front of the short part of the building.
Okay, but do you see what I'm saying?
You don't want it buried behind the railing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we'll have to look at that, and if you're going to allow us to raise a little bit higher, then we can certainly investigate that.
I think you probably will need to.
So the bottom of your sign has got to be higher than that railing, right? Isn't that what you're saying?
Correct.
Corbin?
Right.
Yes, it does. And I don't know how tall or what the distance is from the ground to the bottom of the Steve Anderson for sale sign, but that seems about where you'd probably want the top of your sign to be so that it is visible. So I guess any motion would incorporate the idea that the height of the monument sign, it's up to you guys to kind of figure that out consistent with what we're talking about. I certainly want you to be successful, and I want your sign to be visible. Of course, we don't want it 40 feet tall either, but right?
Okay, I got
Mr.
it.
Mayor, that's something you can work with staff to get, because we're just trying to get the sight line above the railing, and I think that's kind of self-explanatory what we're trying to concept, and just have them work with staff to get it done. I think we're all in favor of that.
Agreed.
Was that your motion, Mike?
I'd make a motion to approve the 3 items as presented, incorporating staff comments. And with regard to the sign, it's the only one that really is changed from staff comments to be consistent with this discussion, so that it's visible above the railing.
I would love to second that.
Motion was made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Was there a no there? Did I hear a no?
There was as I just wanted to, under discussion, I just want to say welcome to Greenfield. And since similar business closed not too long ago at 68th and Layton, I think there's a need. Welcome to the community.
No, thank you so much.
Absolutely. It seems like a great concept. Moving along to item 7A and 7B. This is a special use permit and a site plan review for the American Indian Council on Alcoholism, a proposed social service business to be located at 6520 West Layton Avenue, Suite 101. I just want to be clear about this. This is because of the nature of the use. This is an office in a building. This isn't the entire. It's not an entire building. So, Chris, you want to go through that?
Yes, just Suite 101. Yep. So AICA actually has an office in this building here to the east. Right, yeah, to the east. And so they have a need to expand, and so they found tenant space right next door. And
I'd make a motion to approve the item as presented,
I'll
incorporating.
second that. I'll
Okay.
second that with Steve
Steve, that
Rock.
was you? Okay.
I think everyone has seen the stuff that's on the screen. They're essentially they've been very successful in the building next door. There haven't been problems. They've been a great addition to our community, providing an essential service, and moving next door seems to be sort of a no-brainer. So, motion was made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks,
Moving
Renee.
along.
Yes.
I just said thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
But do clean up that dumpster, okay? Or make sure
I think it's
current
already
landlord
cleaner.
does that. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving along to item 8A and 8B, This is a special use review and a site plan review for Eagle Automotive Performance. This is at 3320 West Howard Avenue.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me get Sean on here. And I'm also seeing there's two questions going on at the same time. Oh, okay. All right, let's see here. So this is a change in tenancy. So special use review, site plan review triggered, and zone C3. They're proposing a 3-year lease, and no employees, as the two business partners will run the business. Hours of operation Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So this was reviewed by the Plan Commission in 2018. The site was full of cars, full of vehicles. The current owner has done a great job of cleaning the site up. However, the Plan Commission at that time requested a site plan. You can see in this picture here in the bottom, that site plan that we requested included asking for a refuse enclosure. So the site plan was never submitted. I've been working with the applicants to get that submitted now, so that the Plan Commission has something to review. So we actually have something on file. The new tenants have requested that rather than constructing a refuse enclosure, there is a notation on the site plan they provided to us that the refuse dumpster will be kept inside 24 hours a day, rolled out just at the time that the truck is going to come pick it up. So that will be a requirement that that dumpster needs to stay inside the building because we do not have a refuse enclosure. They requested to not propose a refuse enclosure. Otherwise, the site is in good condition. There are sale flags on the property. We did ask in the staff report that those be removed. Otherwise, staff recommends approval that this be expedited for Common Council approval at next week's meeting. No public hearing required.
Yeah, I mean, the site looks great and it needs to continue to look great. Understand that sometimes there are customer vehicles there.
Does it look great now because it's empty because of COVID-19, or are they actually cooperating with the parking regulations? Never mind. That was supposed to be funny. It didn't work. It was funnier in my head than it was to all of you.
Okay.
On the delivery, Steve.
I think it's great. Does anybody have any questions or concerns?
My only one is just with having a dumpster that they're going to roll in and out. I think that'll be a problem. I guess it'll be outside more often than inside, but I think that's the only challenge with this site.
I was going to say the same thing, Brian.
Yeah, I'm
They're
not a
gonna
fan
roll
of that. I just don't see that
Be
working long
outside
term.
all day long. You know it's going to be out there as long as
Yep.
they're in the building.
Yeah,
Sean, do you want to address that?
I think one of the issues is that the rent is expensive, and before you make an expensive site improvement, you want to make sure that you're viable. There have been a number of mechanics that have gone through this building. I think we all need to remember what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh, a huge improvement.
There used to be a large tire buried in the ground out in front when it was Augustine's. There were cars that had been there forever, and God bless Mr. Augustine. But this site looks really good. And
What if we said the placement of could be just blocked by something during the day? In other words, they'd have to move it out of it to get to the garbage pickup, but you could tuck it behind something during the day. Because they're right, they're going to work in the garage. They're going to need the space.
Well, yeah, Sean, you've obviously been in the building. Do you want to talk about the feasibility of keeping that inside?
Yes, ma'am. They have the third bay that doesn't have a lift in it, and it's rarely ever used. So we plan to hold it there. And with it not having any food waste or anything in there, we wouldn't attract flies or bugs or smells. We would like to build a refuge for it later on, after we've had time to get in there, make some money, see how it's going to go.
All right. Fair enough.
Yep.
That's acceptable.
okay, I'd make a motion to approve the item as presented, incorporating staff comments with the realization that the dumpster, which will not have perishable food items in it, and that is important, right? I mean, if it's car parts and boxes, that's one thing, and that can be stored internally during non-business hours.
I'll second that.
Second by
Don.
Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving along to number 9, which is a signage plan appeal for BioLife, which is at 7801 West Layton Avenue. This is by Poblocki Signs.
Sorry, just give me a second here to get my.
I'd make a motion to approve the item as presented.
Oh, no, 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 wait, hold on. Wait. I just want to.
Don't do it.
Sorry, hold on one second. Actually, the monument sign design has changed since the staff report was published. So the property's allowed 105 square feet. The staff report is written that they're proposing 186 square feet total, a 90 square foot wall sign, and they were going to utilize the existing 96 square foot monument sign. They actually have reduced the size of the monument sign to 81 square feet. And let's see here. Here's the design that they're proposing. So it's actually less square footage than the staff report, but I just wanted to make it known that we're now talking about, this was the original proposal, talking about a new proposal for a different monument sign. It will be taller than the existing, but still within the code limitation.
I like it.
I like it too.
Good looking.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Second by Alderperson Kastner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Under Community Development Manager Report, next item. Sorry, I should give you more time, right? While you're.
It's okay. I got it. I just wanted to say we're making progress, really close progress with the DOT for MOU for control of the Loomis Crossing park and ride 16-acre site there. We had a conference call with the DOT today, and we anticipate the governor's signature very soon. So that opens the door for potential, because the city would then have control over that land to solicit strongly for developments to take place there. So that's some exciting news, big project that could be a game changer for Greenfield.
Agreed. I just wanted to thank Christy and our attorney, Bruce Block, for all the work that they've done with the DOT. This has been 15 years to get to this point. This was when I was first elected way back when. Within weeks of taking office, I looked for places where there was potential for development, and this was one of the sites. So when that always amuses me on TV, or when people get elected, they go, well, we want development. Let's just go hire somebody and we'll get some. Things like this take forever. This has taken 15 years and we're finally to that point. I also just wanted to point out that there is some very positive potential development available there. It's a very, very tough site. It's been a TIF now for 2 years, 3 years.
2015. So.
Is it 15?
Yeah.
Oh, it's been that long. So I look forward to some real positive things happening there in the near future. And I just wanted to thank Christy and Bruce for working it out with the DOT.
That begs another question. It's a TIF that's 15 years old.
5 years old.
5 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Because we got to repay it pretty soon.
That would be a problem.
yeah. So I think there's some opportunity there. The other TIF too, the hospital at the Knights of Columbus property, that has made it through the entire process.
Yes, the developer is reviewing the draft development agreement right now.
Which is a very positive thing. The Kindred Healthcare place, the vacant hospital on the west side of town, is apparently under contract with someone, as I understand it, to
New ownership.
New ownership, which is a good thing. It sounds like that will go live again soon. Wanted to point out Kawiki Park. If you haven't had a chance to drive over there, which is with the dog boarding place across the street, looking kind of edgy and cool, like it did, I think. Much better than a vacant a former rental equipment store. We've done some really wonderful things at Kawiki Park. I wanted to thank the folks at DPW or City Forester, Scott, and everyone in Park and Rec. Christy working with the neighbors to the west that have some tired commercial properties up on top of the hill. We've managed to form relationships, I think, with them.
Quickies looking really good. The path from the Ridge parking lot where St. Vincent de Paul is, going down into the park. Um, Public Works has done an awesome job getting that in. If you have a chance, go look at it. We had a unceremonial Arbor Day there, if that's the right word.
13 trees were still planted though.
13 trees were planted. Some of them were actually northern strains of redwood, which is pretty cool. I wanted to thank Jeff Katz too at and Renee Neighborhood Services. So there's this thing out there where there are monarch highways along ATC and power line right of ways. So we're working to get a grant to work with ATC to have this be part of a monarch highway, which would be very, very cool, consistent with our Bird City, Bee City, and Butterfly City designations that we started, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months ago. It's probably 2 years ago now. So that's really, really cool. The west side of town is really sprucing up very, very nicely.
Mr. Mayor, what about the bike path along the right of way?
Oh, that's another big one, right? So something, and I was talking to Jeff Stone recently, who used to be a representative, a legislator. If you remember him?
Alderman.
Yeah, when he was an alderman, he was an alderperson here too, right? A
Yep.
long
Yeah.
time ago.
Back in the
About
day.
20 years ago almost.
Oh,
But one of
Probably
his,
more than that.
yeah, one of his dreams was to have a pedestrian path along the right of way. Those are the high tension power lines from one edge of the city to the next. We proudly received a grant in the amount of $1.2 million to design and install the power line trail, which will go from 60th Street all the way to roughly 105th Street along that trail. I know that's something Alderperson Casters wanted to do. I've wanted to do since I was an alderperson.
60th Street where? Where does it start at 60th?
It's along the Webco right away. So if you were to go north of the freeway, there are power lines that are adjacent to the freeway, but
Right there
if
by
you
the
go-
power lines?
if you go further north, up 60th,
Okay.
there's the huge, I guess it was the old interurban line, right? That was where the interurban went
yeah.
way back when. So that will be the power line trail. The ultimate goal, and Jeff and everyone has been working very closely with the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, the DOT, and a number of nonprofit organizations. The goal is to lengthen and expand the power line trail going east, hopefully all the way to Lake Michigan or wherever it can go. Okay. So it's pretty exciting stuff. It's especially these days where people are biking and walking more, to have basically a pedestrian highway parallel to our freeway, although not immediately adjacent, would be a wonderful thing. It's a huge win for the city.
What's the timeline on that, Mr. Mayor?
It's hard to say. As I understand it, the dollars are federal dollars. They flow through the state. It's probably 2021, 22, somewhere in there is what I was told. So it still has to be completely engineered and designed. You don't think of things like street crossings and those kinds of things and what the lay of the land is, because it's not all perfectly straight. It's not just like taking a front end loader and skimming off 8 inches and putting asphalt down. So that's extremely exciting. What else? The turf skateboard park, the bowls have been unearthed, but I'm not supposed to say that publicly to keep people away. They're there and they're in good shape. We're still working with.
You got that photograph, right? I sent you.
There's a pretty cool photograph of it. Yeah, there's a lot of cool photographs. So this is the Lambeau Field of skateboard parks, I think. Most people agree.
Love that.
So the ultimate goal there is when we purchase that 2-acre triangular parcel from the state, the goal, we purchased it for $1, and as part of the agreement was that it would need to be used as a park, and not for commercial purposes. The beauty is too that there's a billboard and a cell phone tower on there. And we're hoping that the resources from that can flow back into either the Quality of Life Fund or the park itself to help develop it. Um, we're a long ways off on that as far as plans and all of that. But the cool thing is that the bowls are still there. They're still in pretty decent shape.
Very cool.
It's a very cool thing. It will be a regional draw.
Very cool. Any idea when's the new Starbucks going to be open?
That Christy may be able to answer, but there wasn't a lot of
They said possibly June, but they haven't been working consistently the last couple of days, so I don't know.
Yeah, there was nobody there today. The thing that does concern me about that is when we approve that with drive-throughs and stacking, right? We had some concerns during normal times with stacking. If you've been to the Starbucks in Hales Corners or up Highway 100 in West Dallas, they're stacked like a long ways. Just
Yeah, I know.
Around the building.
Right.
yes, especially the one in Hales Corners. I mean, it goes through the parking lot, and there's like I don't know if it's a service drive or it's a street or whatever it is, but there are people just backed up all over the place.
There was a Saturday, it must have been maybe 2 weeks ago. It was a really nice Saturday, and we were up at the Starbucks in Germantown, and they were directing traffic. They had someone directing traffic. I mean, it's weird times now, right? But
It is weird times.
The weirdness right now.
I guess the later they open, the better. Is what I'm thinking. Because I mean, if we can get back to normalcy, that would be nice.
Right. When is the road changes supposed to happen? That's supposed to happen before they open. Nothing's been done on that.
True. Yeah, that's true. The median cut changes. Yeah.
I'm not sure how they're coordinating with Milwaukee County.
Yeah.
Because next year, in 2021, Layton Avenue will be completely reconstructed. So
right.
I'm
And
sure
they understood that, but they were supposed to do that as part of the project.
I'll put a reminder. I'm going to put a reminder on my calendar right now to contact them and ask them how that's coming along and what their timeline is for that.
Right. And if there's backups on 43rd Street, then the entrance will be closed. Correct, Mayor?
Well, that's what we left the last meeting at, right? And
right.
And it wasn't. It seemed like the legal remedies were not as direct as just closing that entrance, right? Where they had the right to appeal. You'll recall that meeting. It was about an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
Right. I know.
Mr. Mayor, any updates on 84 South with the beer garden / Greenfield Public Market?
Yeah, well, so
Nice part.
one of the things that I think the COVID crisis has brought to bear is that it's expected that potentially 30% of independent restaurants will survive. You've seen those numbers, this crisis. So the business model of creating a public market containing potentially subsidized restaurants is very challenging right now.
Absolutely.
And I know that Cobalt, the developer is very cognizant of that. Certainly it doesn't make sense to proceed at this point with that concept. It's going to wait.
Understandable.
It's going to wait.
Yeah. I assume is that going to affect the beer garden as well?
I think everything that's restaurant related and has a bar as its main component, like a brew hall potentially would, right? I think is sort of up in the air at this point until things shake out. I think some of I was talking to the mayor of another community that's near us that has a similar development with restaurants that are closed. And it's a very challenging time in that development. Even at 84 South, while Portillo's has a steady stream with its drive-through, or Culver's on 60th and Layton has I mean, there upwards of 20 cars in a
Right.
drive. The other, walk-in counter service restaurants have really suffered dramatically. And I think it's a lot like when Greg was talking about, well, you need small units that are accessible as opposed to big buildings earlier. I think
Mhm.
you're going to see a dramatic change in the restaurant industry where they need to have drive-through. They need to make sure that they have income streams, right, in the event something bad happens again.
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong, but I'm
No, at least they care. Like I see Outback in particular. I think they're both doing steady business. Some of those restaurants.
Really
Yeah.
surprising to me that Zupa's right across the street from Portillo's is almost empty. I mean, every time we've been there, it's just, and they're such a good restaurant,
Yep.
but they're just not pulling them in right now.
No, they got to be hurting, all of them right there, other
was
than
Yeah.
Portillo and
going there for dinner
Outback.
tonight.
That's too bad.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to thank Christy for being such a great Zoom instructor. And I
You
think
did
you
really good.
went effortlessly, if I can get that out.
You did really good, Christy. Thank you.
Thank
Oh.
you.
No
Well
problem.
done. Well done.
So where are we at?
I was actually nervous. I haven't been nervous for a meeting probably since my first plan commission meeting here. And I had butterflies in my stomach for this one. I was like, ooh, this is a lot to handle at once.
It went well.
I haven't been nervous about public speaking for years and years and years, but this whole streaming of our church services has really thrown me for a loop. But we're getting through it. We're getting through it. We're surviving. So
A little bit different speaking to yourself rather than your congregation.
it's I heard somebody say it's always been more important to focus on the text than the congregation, and that's proven to be very true right now.
Okay, I just got a text from the mayor that he accidentally got kicked out with an update screen on his computer. So Carl, you may need to make those.
Oh, geez. I was waiting for him to chime in. I think the next item, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second that, Chris Aline.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
We're
Thank you, guys.
adjourned at
See you again
Thank
soon.
you, everyone.
Aye.